Hi, another episode of Rod's Views where you get insightful, direct, uncontaminated, thoughtful, and thought provoking views on current affairs in South Africa. Today, I want to talk about a few South Africa, the movie, and a few elements or um, episodes in this movie. Okay, let's talk about a few. The one is the IEC, and there can be lots of stuff around that part of the movie, around the allegations around the IEC, um, the fact that when the scoreboard or results board went offline for about 2 hours, issues around that, issues around when the 26 parties nationally lodged a complaint and they went to the Constitutional Court, was rejected, and now they're apparently going to the International Court of Justice, I think, and they're going to the Electoral Court. And then obviously there were complaints that I think about 19 parties lodged in the Western Cape around the dynamics of the IEC. So the IEC, and in spite of, and then Zuma's late night press conference threatening the IEC, but then not to release the results, but the IEC proceeded. And then a late addition to the whole saga around the IEC and its credibility is, oh yes, there was a one around one of its commissioners, Janet Love, also around conflict of interest issues, and the court ruled against that. Luckily, she escaped, she dodged that bullet. But then the IEC's got a new bullet. One of its commissioners, a lady that oversaw lots of its activities, she allegedly is in court around Commissioner Maseko, corruption allegations and so on, when she was at Standard Bank. And the IEC is playing a wait and see role. I think, again, short sighted. But the whole saga, one saga around the IEC. Then there's a one around the MK party and Jacob Zuma. Whole issues around that. The issue around Kumalo being removed as a leader, being in parliament on the list, and then off the list, him going to court. He's flying to Cape Town, hoping to take up his seat. Zuma then being adamant that he's not taking up his seat. The court ruling against him. All of that stuff. And then the whole saga around MKP deciding not to take up their seats in parliament, not going to any of the legislatures, although some of their members went to some of the legislatures, and the removal of people from the list, including other people on the list. Jacob Zuma's press conference, his daughter's role, the role of his son behind the scenes, the issue of, there was an issue where the alleged falsifying of signatures for them to be registered as a party. All of that, and the fact that Zuma took a decision that none of their leaders will go into parliament, they'll stay out of parliament, so he would actually control MKP from outside of parliament. So there's a whole MKP and its role in the Progressive Caucus, whatever that means. And then the other uh, um, episode or part of this movie is the whole question of the Progressive Caucus, the formation of the Progressive Caucus on the eve of the sitting of Parliament, demands that it made and demands that the government just rejected. Who makes up the Progressive Caucus and who doesn't make it up, and how did it decide certain people become part of the Progressive Caucus and so on. And then the Progressive Caucus being decimated, people are leaving the Progressive Caucus slowly but surely. PACs joining the GNU, Raisam Zanzis said they're joining the GNU, UDM joining the GNU. So all of that, so there's a whole saga around the Progressive Caucus. And then the big fight between Gayton McKenzie and Helen Zille. So one will need to find where this comes from when the whole issue of the Moonshot Pact, when Zille them didn't want McKenzie to be part of it, and them calling each other names during the elections, etc. Zille's being of the strong view that he's a gangster and got gangster mentality and all of that stuff, and he's dishonest and dishonorable. And McKenzie going on a rave about her the other night, calling her a Karen, and that she's got a Baaskap mentality, when she indicated the ANC can't just pull the PA onto the GNU. All of the polemic around that. So the whole issue around the fight between McKenzie and Zille. So that's another thing. Then the whole thing around the GNU, in terms of how that was agreed to, the lead up to it, the fact that whilst we were still sitting at the Cape Town International Convention Centre, waiting for the swearing, as the members of Parliament were being sworn in, and the Speaker was going to be voted for, and the President, and there was no agreements there yet up till 10:30, 11 o'clock, until all people, the Freedom Front the EFF's Floyd Shivambu called for a comfort break, and the Chief Justice reluctantly gave it. It was only during that period where they actually signed it, where Mbalula and the ANC realized the importance. If they didn't sign that, the DA was not going to vote for the candidate as Speaker, and was not going to vote for the candidate as President. So they were in a bind. They needed to get that over the line, and then they signed the agreement. And it was interesting that the people who signed the agreement of intent to form the GNU were the ANC through Mbalula, and Zille representing the DA. IFP was nowhere there. So that whole thing around the GNU, the interpretation of the GN, what the document means, and how certain people want to pull back, and the different interpretations and questions whether people really read it, and so on, etc. But the bottom line is, none of them are in the majority to form a government on their own. So, and then there were lots of people that speculated around, starting to talk about the GNU document. They were not in the room. We were not in the room when they negotiated, when they discussed, when they signed this thing. And And that's a big thing. So the ANC is pulling out now the chief whip to speak and others to speak to try and pull back, etc. But they were not there. Mbalula and the negotiating team were there. So the GNU is a interesting movie on its own. So it's another scene in this South African movie. Then there's a scene around Julius Malema and the EFF. How they had to eat humble pie after the elections. Before the elections, they were, as they say in Afrikaans, windgat. They were arrogant. They were going to be the new government, etc. Or the electorate gave them a hiding. And then there's his court case in the Eastern Cape, in East London, around this gun that he shot. And just the spectacle that's going on in court there, how he's disrespectful towards a magistrate and towards a prosecutor. And I just think he's digging a grave for himself, someone who's on the JSC as well. So, so the Julius Malema saga is interesting. Imagine this guy gets found guilty and they give him a sentence to such an extent that would then prevent him from becoming a member of parliament, and he'll have to get out of parliament. That's going to be interesting. Then there's the role and the view of the alliance partners of the ANC and business people that support them, and the Black Business Council, etc., who's against this GNU that they're signing with the DA. They are totally against it. But the question is, what's going to happen when Ramaphosa appoints a cabinet and some of their members becomes part of the cabinet? Are they going to reject those appointments? Because it's now a matter of principle. You're not going to serve in a cabinet with the DA, for example. So what are they going to do? Is principle going to triumph, or self-interest going to triumph? That's going to be interesting. Then what was interesting, we'll have to do that's a whole episode on its own, and the discussions between them and the ANC and so on around this whole thing, the GNU and so on. Then there's markets. The influence of the markets on the South African politics. And we all saw how the Rand strengthened when it was announced the GNU was signed, and when the speaker was appointed, and the ANC speaker, DA deputy speaker, the agreements in Gauteng and KZN in particular, where the ANC, the IFP and the DA were on board, and then obviously when Ramaphosa was sworn in as president. So the Rand broke through 18 Rand and so on. So clear indication. So will the markets punish South Africa, or will it reward South Africa? So let's see what happens when the cabinet gets appointed. Then linked to that, I want to talk about the influences in this whole thing in South Africa political space. The funders of political parties, the roles that they play, and how they can influence the direction that things are going in South Africa without being in the ring themselves. As if they're using proxies and they're playing Russian roulette, and put money on different numbers and so on, and see which horse is going to win or which number is going to come in. So a lot of their money was, you can't really say it's wasted on the likes of Rise Mzansi, Action SA, even UDM, IFP, all of those got money. And so the role of the funders, so if I had millions, etc., I'll do the same thing. I'll spend money. I'll I actually told some of my friends who's got money, I said, listen, go and support some of the parties without you being in the ring. Then the political commentators, it's clear that some of them are in the camps, the political commentators and pollsters are on the side of certain political parties or interests. So the role that they played, so that's another scene, some scenes in this movie. And then obviously the newspapers, um, the kind of role that the newspaper groupings are playing. The so-called those who are independent and those who are part of certain stables, whether they radio or, I mean, the media, whether it is radio or television or even newspapers. And then civil society groupings. There's some civil society groupings that were clearly linked to some political parties and the roles that they are playing and the messaging they got out and so on. So that's another segment of this movie. And then the late joiners of the GNU, the smaller parties, I call it the one-seat parties. Man, I still of the view a party with 1 or 2 seats should not be part of the GNU. They must be in parliament and they must go and play their parliamentary role and oversight role. So if they part of the executive, who's going to hold that rest of the executive accountable? Who's going to hold them accountable if they all in the executive? This is just self-interest with it. I don't even say with the greatest respect. It's clear self-interest. It's to think you're bigger than you are. The voters gave them a clear indication what the voters thought of them. So they must just stay in their lane and play their role as political parties and part of the opposition. And how do they reconcile the fact that they are now going part of cabinet? It just doesn't make sense. There's no way. I'm crystal clear. If I was in that position, there's no way I would have gone into the executive. Although I support the concept of a GNU, but a party with 1 seat or 2 seats should not be part of a government of national unity. It's crystal clear. And those who are older than 70, I'm of the view you must go and retire. You've had many years, and those who've been there in Parliament since 1994, go and retire. Give other people opportunities to do that. Then, ordinary South Africans. What do we make of all of this? Are we saying that we've been had again by these politicians? We've voted, now they're going and they just do what is in their own interest. They don't care about the rest of South Africa. So that is another scene in terms of how do South Africans view, how did they view the political setup in South Africa, and how are they viewing it now, and how they're viewing what's going on in Parliament and in Tuinhuis and the union buildings. Then another big episode is going to be, or theme of this movie is the whole question of the cabinet. How is the cabinet being put together? Who's the president consulting? Who's playing what role? There is interactions between him and Steenhuisen and the president of the IFP and so on, and the role, his interactions with the Secretary General of the ANC and the alliance, and who are the 2 people that he's bringing into cabinet, because he can bring 2 people who's not members of parliament into the cabinet. I think it's already brought Park Stow in. So who are those people? And then a big thing is going to be the size of the cabinet. Is a cabinet going to be the same size? Is it even going to be bigger? Or is he going to have the courage to keep his word to South Africans and reduce the size of the cabinet? And because most of the parties that campaign, DA, all of them, has said the cabinet is too large. We don't even need deputy ministers. So how will they now feel they're going to go and serve in a cabinet, and the cabinet is enlarged in order to accommodate their personal interests? It's not the interest of South Africa. So, and then the voters would take that into account come 2026 and 2029. So the size of the cabinet and who gets what portfolios. Are they going to give effect to this notion of the best person for the job? The best people for particular portfolios, and they do away with deputy ministers or half of the deputy ministers. Doing that would give them great kudos. But so those would be all of the themes of the movie called South Africa. And then we got to decide. Sometimes a movie would be a comedy, sometimes a movie would be a horror show, sometimes it would be a thriller, sometimes there'll be drama and so on. So what kind of genre would the movie called South Africa Inc. be? So yeah, don't forget to join us, subscribe to the channel, to Rod's Views. Till we talk again, salute.